Hello everyone, I'm home. Welcome back. I got into some boxes this week and drug them up from the basement and put some of my fall stuff away a little bit. I kept some out for Thanksgiving, but all my Halloween stuff went to the basement, and I just brought up one tote and started going through it. And it's always exciting to see what you have from last year that you've forgotten about. But guess what else happened this morning? Oh my goodness, guys, we woke up to our first snow this morning. I couldn't believe it when I got up. If we've had any snow, I haven't noticed it early in the morning. When you look out either side of our front porch, you have this cabin off to the right. I love to see it with the snow on the roof. It reminds me of Tennessee back in the Walton's days when they made the Homecoming movie. And then across the street from us, across the road, we have another cabin that you can see pretty much in the fall, but you can see it mostly when the lights are on. And my boys used to like to hike over there. And I leave my curtains tied back most of the time, but today I saw this beautiful snow and I just went ahead and pulled them back. I keep them kind of tied back so that the window's covered a little more when it's cold, but I like to see the snow, so I opened them up, and it's just so beautiful, even with all my fall decorations still in the window, which, like I said, will stay there till after Thanksgiving. And the day after Thanksgiving, I'll put my crystal out on that table and a little bit of red glass and maybe a little bit of green, I don't know. But my poor mums that are out on my dresser out on the porch, they're looking pretty dry. I've been watering them, but they dry out, and I haven't planted all of them yet, but I might plant those if it warms up. Then I got into the box and I found these two stockings that I made last year, and I hung them up just as they are. And this year I've decided I'm going to tea stain them. The bigger one is pretty long, and I just hang them around in different places. But these have lace across the top and a little bit of embroidery, and I thought maybe I would even take some red and green and embroider some more berries and some leaves on them. Doctor them up just a little bit. I like for my stuff to be real plain and simple. So I decided I was going to tea stain them, but the big one I wanted to be red, dark red. So I mixed up some craft paint in some water, and I soaked the big one in that painted water. Well, it came out too pink, which was fine because I knew once I put it in the brown stain, the brown will cover it up. But I thought it might make a deep red. And then the other one, I put a little bit of green in the water and soaked it for a little bit, and it turned out perfect. And I've decided, I think what I'm going to do is dip the pink one in brown stain and leave the green one plain. So I mixed up some coffee and some burnt umber paint in a little bit of water, and I soaked the big stocking, and it turned out exactly the way I wanted it to. A real nice faded brown. Looks like it's been around for 100 years. And then I took some actual stain, and put some spots on it to make it look like dirt. And then I hung the green one up in the window, and I thought, it's a little too perfect. So I just took my hand and took some of the brown and coffee stained water and kind of sprinkled it on certain spots, and especially on the toes and up the seams where it would get dirty. And I like the way it turned out because it's more green. And so I laid them on my kitchen table on a paper towel, and I'm letting them dry. And I'll probably stuff them with a little bit of cotton batting. I like to leave them flat looking, but I like to stuff them just a little bit. And then I found this one that I'd made last year with that toile fabric that I got at the thrift store, and I really love it, and I'm not going to tea stain it. I like the way it looks. And I drug out a couple of Christmas books. There was one little box that had about 6 books in it, and I want to talk to you about books today. I have some good stories about some books that I have. And you know how I've been telling you that I like to work with wood, and I like to build things out of old cruddy wood, and if it's not cruddy enough, I like to beat it up and stain it and maybe beat it up a little more. Jeffrey Kevin on Decorating Happily Ever After was laughing about that. He said he looks for pristine antiques, and he said, I've never in my life beat up a board, and he thought it was funny that I do. Well, I've been seeing in the primitive magazines these little candle cubbies, they call them. They're primitive looking, and I had a bunch of scraps left over from my countertop, and I thought, well, I can make one of those. So the other night I went out in the garage, and in about an hour, I made this little candle cubby, and I just made it from the pictures I saw in the magazines and online. I didn't have a pattern or anything. I just draw out my design and I cut it and I glue it together. Then I nail it together with small finishing nails that have a very small head on them so you don't really see them. And then I don't even clamp it. I didn't clamp this anyway. And it set up just perfect. And the original picture that I saw had black wood, so I used wood out of my front yard. Now Jeffrey, Kevin, you pay attention to this. I bought this table years ago. It came off of a truck. I was in an antique store, and this guy was dumping off some antiques to this place, and they were pulling this off the truck. And I said to the lady, "Oh my gosh, what do you want for that?" And she said, "Oh my gosh," because it had lots of dents and it was bad. And she said it was dirty. She said, "Oh, I don't know, $25," and I bought it, and it's beautiful. And I was telling Jeffrey, my boys, when they were little, would take their cars and trucks and run over all of our furniture. And that was great with my furniture because I didn't care. It got more scratches. And this one has screws holding the legs on. And it looks bad here, but in person it doesn't look this scratched up, far away. But it's got beautiful legs. And it's one of my favorite pieces I've ever had. So yeah, when I was looking for wood to make my little candle cubby, I went out in the backyard and my husband was laughing because I was bringing in wood that I have laying underneath our grill so that the grill legs wouldn't go into the dirt. And I ended up taking the grill out to the garage finally. But yeah, I used all the old black wood, and then the wood that's on the back of this little cubby is just stained. Now that was at nighttime when the lights were glowing on it. This is in the daytime when it's not so, there's no light glow on it. But the wood on the sides is the black wood that came out of the backyard, and the back piece is just the wood that I used on my countertop. And then, of course, I had to decorate it different ways. I found this old rusty bell and a little sprig of greenery. And these little candles, you can get these at Dollar Tree. You get 2 in a package for $1.25, and they have a nice little base. They're battery operated. I just grunged them up. I put some glue on them. Well, I painted them first brown. Then I put a little glue on them and sprinkled cinnamon and coffee grounds on them and let them dry. And then I sprayed it with a matte sealer to keep it all together. And they're really nice little candles for 2 for $1.25. And then I took a magic marker, a yellow one, and did the tip. Now, when we were in Colonial Williamsburg years ago, we took the boys there and did a really historical tour of that place. It was amazing. And we went into this little village where they were showing reenactments of things that they used to do. And there were several kitchens where they would show in these old houses the girls in their pretty old colonial clothes cooking and baking. And I was noticing that everyone we went into, they had like cloth, like calico cloth on their counters, and they were rolling out biscuits and pie crust and noodles. And I finally asked one of the girls, I said, "Can you tell me what the cloth's all about on your counter? I mean, do you do that to keep your counters from getting dough on them?" And she said, "Well, back in the old days, they didn't have marble and quartz and all the fancy countertops, and they didn't always have something to roll it out on, so they would use cloth." And I knew I had seen cloth sold, like pastry cloth they call it, and I just couldn't see the point in buying cloth like that when I could make it myself. And they even have these covers for your rolling pins, and those girls were using those. And I said, "I've never seen that before." And they said, "Yeah, and it's really economical." And they were just using old calico that they said was from old skirts. Now, these are images that I got offline of the pastry cloths and rolling pin covers that you can buy. And I've always, ever since we went on that trip, I've thought about those cutting cloths that they had. They called them baking and pastry cloths and counter cloths. They all had a different name for it, but they used old skirts and old shirts. Well, I came home the other day and was thinking about that, and I thought, I'm going to get my stash of fabric. This was a big king-size pillowcase I got, only one, and I got it for the fabric. I thought I'll make something out of that beautiful fabric. And I got it out. It was brand new in the package. I thrifted it. And it was by someone named Sherry Klein. And I looked online, and most of her stuff was sold at high-end stores like Neiman Marcus and different places like that. This pattern was called Afterglow. It looked the most like my fabric. And it was quite expensive for a comforter and 2 shams. But I'm never going to use that king-size sham for a sham. So I decided to cut it and take the back off. The back was just a real thin cream-colored linen. And I thought the fabric was just so beautiful, and it's really thick quality fabric. It's like a heavy linen. And I thought, I probably wouldn't roll anything out on this. I washed it, of course. But as a countercloth to put on the counter, to put my cutting board on, it would help protect my wood countertops from water, because I'm kind of nervous about that. I know I've sealed it really good, but this just sparked a new thing in me I wanted to do. So I go through my fabric and found that. And then I found kind of a thicker linen placemat. It's flexible. And then I found this curtain topper that I'd bought years ago, and I washed it up. And as I got to looking at it, someone had made it by hand. And it's the most beautiful colonial looking fabric. And I thought, well, I'll wash that real good, iron it. That'll be a nice countercloth. It'll cover a lot of space on my new wood countertops when I'm baking. And I just fell in love with it. So I got to looking, and I bought this probably 5 years ago. It's been in my stash of fabric. It was called Arbor Trail, the pattern was. And look here, guys. It was made by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation. And I looked that up online, and their foundation made all kinds of colonial looking fabric, and it was quite expensive. And the tag on it said to dry clean, because it was screen printed, and I'd already thrown it in the washer and washed it, and it was fine. And I'll never dry clean it, I'll just wash it. So I just thought it was funny that I got that idea in Colonial Williamsburg, and here I found this fabric in my stash. And so I folded them all up. I cut them in 24 by 12 inch pieces. Some of them are a little smaller than that. And that big red piece is an old faded out tablecloth I got recently to make Santa jackets with. It's in bad shape, but it looks really good in this picture, but it's real faded out. And it's a huge tablecloth, so I'll cut it up, and it's real soft because it's been washed so many times. And I'll have a lot of pastry, baking, cutting cloths for my countertop, and I'm real excited about it. Then, as I'm getting into my books, I love Christmas books. I love books in general, but I love Christmas books. And I'm going through the box, and of course the first one that pops up is the book that my boys had when they were little, called The Biggest, Most Beautiful Christmas Tree. It's a little golden book that doesn't have a cover, and I think that they've written on it a few times. But when they were little, we read this book all the time. And I've picked up, this is what the cover looks like. I've picked up 3 or 4 of them at thrift stores and kept them on hand, and I decorate with them because I figure someday they might want one for their kids. But usually when I get these books out, I just kind of tuck them around the house at Christmas. But today I dove in and read the book again. And it's the sweetest book about a big old Christmas tree out in the woods. And it's inhabited by a bunch of field mice and chipmunks. And there's an old couple named Mr. and Mrs. Acorn. And the illustrations are just precious. And it's about these 2 little, Nina and Nutley, these little, I guess they're chipmunks or mice. And they're fretting because they're afraid that their big old tree's going to be lost in the woods and Santa's not going to come because he didn't come last year. And they're just nervous wreck about it. And all of a sudden, Aunt Mim shows up. Wise old Aunt Mim. And she's got a bag of decorations, pine cones and ribbons and all kinds of pretty things. And she's like, you kids shouldn't be crying. That's nonsense. Santa just doesn't find you because this tree's just hidden in the woods. We need to decorate it. So they all jump up in the tree and they start decorating with Aunt Mim's goodies, berries and pine cones and the old acorn man, he's helping them, and they're just having a ball. And as you're reading this, you just feel a connection to these little animals. You feel like they're real. They're just so sweet. And all the woodland animals come and gather around their beautiful tree when they get finished. And I can just remember my boys sitting there with their eyes wide open thinking, wow, wouldn't that be neat? And then Nina and Nutley go to bed and they sleep peacefully thinking Santa just might come. And of course, they have their hot chocolate sitting there, and the illustrations are adorable. And the next morning, Santa has shown up, and they're so happy, and they got their little pajamas on, and it's so sweet. And the neighbors heard them and arrived with gifts of their own. After all these years, declared Old Gray Acorn, Christmas has come to this old tree. Dad brought out the special Christmas cookies and tea, and the children shared the goodies with their friends. Everyone raised a cup and drank a toast to Christmas and to wise Aunt Mim, who just smiled her big smile. Now, Aunt Mim, while we're reading this book, I was thinking it, but one of my boys said it out loud when he was little. He said, Mom, Aunt Mim is like Aunt Bev. My sister-in-law was the fun sister. She always had the overly decorated house, had the big Christmas parties, bringing out all the fun stuff, cookies, candy, fudge that she made, and decorations, and letting the kids do whatever they wanted. And she would I remember one time, she gave my boys a strand of tinsel and told them to decorate her fish tank. And they had so much fun doing that. They were like 3 years old. And the boys noticed that. And the Aunt Mim and Aunt Bev were a lot alike. They shared the joy. And like I said, I have 2 or 3 copies of this book, and it's just always going to be a part of our lives. And looking at it, opening it today, I see the telltale signs of my twin boys now. I didn't realize they had put Batman and Spider-Man stickers on every page. But that makes the book even more special. And that's the copy that we read all the time. And, books are important. My boys would bring books home from school, and we would sit down and read them and read them and read them. And then I was always bringing books home. And back then I didn't thrift as much as I do now. I would have had them a lot more books. But they had a lot of books, and they loved them. And they're important. And I have great nieces and nephews now, and friends who have grandkids. And I try to thrift books for them if I find really nice, clean books that... Look at this. It just warms my heart to know that even though they kind of tore up their book, that they loved that little book so much. And like I said, it might have been me that loved the book so much, but I think the boys might remember it if they would sit down and read it. And I'll save it for them, and someday they'll have the other copies. So they would go to what was it they had at school, the book fair, and they brought home these books that they loved called The Library Mouse. It's a little mouse named Sam, and he's living in the library in his little house underneath the baseboard. And when everyone would leave at night, he would come out and sit at the desk and act like he was a librarian. And one day he decided to write his own book, and he would tuck them around in the library, and the kids would find him, and everybody was trying to figure out who the author was and where's Sam the mouse. And he wrote a book called Squeak about a mouse's life. And it was just the sweetest book and so well illustrated. And I've saved these back for the boys so they can give them to their kids someday. And I'm just kind of sentimental about stuff like that. I have a book that was mine from 1964 of The Night Before Christmas. And I set it out under a tree in my bedroom every year because it's just special to me. So I'm in the thrift store the other day, and I found this perfect little book. It didn't look like it had ever been opened. When I went to open it, it kind of cracked because it hadn't been used. And I got it for my girlfriend's little granddaughter. She's got a newly adopted granddaughter that's just at the age where she's starting to get into books. And I happen to know that her grandma is a big fan of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So I got this little book for her. She was the first one I thought of when I saw the little clean, perfect book. And I thought it would be fun for her to keep at Grandma's house so she and Grandma can read it, and Grandma can share that story with her because her grandma's always been a big fan of this. She always puts on Facebook, hey, Rudolph's coming on Wednesday night. Don't you guys forget it. And I'm glad she reminds me because I love it too. And then I found this little Rudolph chocolate piece that I thought I would wrap up and put with it. Little kids, no matter how little or inexpensive the gift is, you wrap it up in pretty paper and put a bow on it, and little kids love gifts. I'm a big kid and I like gifts. So I'm going to put that with her book, and I also got her a coloring book, and I'll probably find her some more stuff before I give it to her. And I don't collect Rudolph books, but I found this one the other day. It's a different edition of the Rudolph story with Santa on the cover, and it was clean and perfect. I always smell the books to make sure they don't have a smoke smell, and this book was like perfect, and I wiped it off, and I'm going to put it in my box with my books for every year and share them with my grandkids someday, hopefully. But then I looked, and I did have another copy of Rudolph that was from like 1975, and I thought, maybe I do collect Rudolph stuff. There's people on Facebook that actually collect anything Rudolph, vintage, new, it doesn't matter, they want it. And then in my stash, I had this little baby's Christmas book from like 1982, I believe this book was from. I just like to buy them if they look vintage, clean, nice, new. Sometimes they can be a little worn. This one is a 1975 book, and it says Mark at the top, and someone gave 59 cents for it, and I just think it's real vintage looking, and I set it around somewhere in the house. I just like the vintage look and anything Christmas. And I showed you this last year, but it's the Christmas Memories book that kind of dives into the decades and starts way back in the day when Christmas first originated, and it goes all the way up to today and the changes in Christmas decorations. And it has a lot of cool pictures of the old vintage trees and ornaments and how the stores displayed their things, and it's really interesting. My nephew Brad gave me this book last year, and it's by Susan Wagoner with 2 G's in Wagoner, and you can still find it. And if you're sentimental about Christmas, about the old days, you would love this book. It's on Amazon and thriftedbooks.com. I looked up all of these books, and you can find them. It's very interesting to go on there and see how many people are selling their Christmas books. And then someone in my comments asked me to elaborate a little more on this little book that I found at a estate sale. It's called American Country Christmas, and it's the one that's it was made in like 1982, I think. But it's full of vintage Santa Claus figurines and old antiques filled with Christmas decorations and crocks and baskets and just the traditional Christmas look. And it's well worth whatever you have to give for it at thriftedbooks.com, probably $5. It's a really good book. And then Christmas Treasury. They used to make these every year, and I have several of them. I have a green one and a gold one. And they're just poems and old Victorian pictures and recipes and just displaying the ways of the old days. So if you have a chance to pick up any of these books, I think you'd really enjoy them. So I'm in Dollar Tree the other day, and I'm looking at coloring books for that little girl, and I saw this book. And it's not a Dollar Tree book. It was made by another company, but it was $1.25, and it's a big square book with what I considered the most beautiful, vivid, bold illustrations. It was just beautiful. And I have a friend who collects 'Twas the Night Before Christmas books in all editions. She likes different ones. And I don't know, she's probably got 20 of them. And I thought, she was the first person I thought of. And it was such a good quality book for that price that I said to myself, I have my little niece and I have my friend who's got the new little granddaughter, and I may have grandkids someday. I know I keep saying that, but I thought for $1.25, I ended up buying 5 of them. And I'm going to put 2 back for my future grandchildren. And if not, they're for me. And I hope you can see the holographic image on the letters. It's a really pretty book. And I opened it up and I read it right there in the store and to make sure it was the real story. And it was by Clement C. Moore. And it's illustrated by David A. Cutting. And you're not supposed to share stuff like this, like reproduce it or whatever. But I'm promoting this book. I want you guys to buy it if you can find it in your Dollar Tree. It's just beautiful. And it's a book that you could keep for years and years, and it's going to be an heirloom someday. I probably put a little too much thought into this stuff, but when I find quality, I like to get it, especially at the Dollar Tree. I mean, if this book was at Barnes & Noble, it would be $12.95. And it's like a paperback book, but it's a good book, and 20 years from now, you'll be glad you have it. And like I said, it's got the most beautiful illustrations. And I was thinking of my friend that collects the 'Twas the Night Before Christmas books, and I looked it up to see when that book first came out, and it was in the early 1800s, and it was originally called A Visit from Old St. Nick, or A Visit from St. Nick. Different versions have popped up, but it's a beautiful book, and I got one for my friend, my niece, my girlfriend's little granddaughter, two for myself, and I'm going to tuck it away with my ornaments every year, and I'm going to be really pleased that I spent $5 on these books. So I ran into a little thrift store because this time of year is when they put out Christmas ornaments, and every now and then I find a vintage one or an antique one. And I found on their table of Christmas books, The Night Before Christmas, another edition of it, done with teddy bears, like little, I don't know if he's a polar bear or just a little teddy bear, but it was a different edition, but the same story. So I purchased it for my girlfriend, and it also had the most beautiful little illustrations in it, and it was good, clean, solid book. Of course, if it was antique enough and vintage enough, and I liked the looks of it, and it was falling apart, I'd still buy it. I don't turn up my nose at falling apart things, you know that. But then on the same table, I found this one of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and it's the 60th anniversary edition, which is really pretty. It's kind of an oblong book, and it's paperback as well, but it also had some beautiful illustrations in it, more of a vintage look. And I think my girlfriend's going to enjoy it I hope she's not watching this video because I want to surprise her with these 3 books. But I'll be looking for her different editions of that book for the rest of my life as long as I'm thrifting. And I thought the illustrations in this one were more Victorian, maybe. And I read the book. I like to sit down and just look through them. And even though I know the story by heart, it's just reading the book and touching the pages and feeling the use of it. Someone has read that book. The cover's got a little damage. Someone has sat and read this book to their kids or their grandkids or just to themselves. And there's just a lot of nostalgia in books. And I think it's so important to read and absorb the words and absorb the beautiful images. And anyway, enough of my rambling about Christmas books, but a nice big stack of Christmas books makes me happy, especially when they're thrifted. And I sit and I think about my kids, and I can see their little faces when we would read these books and how they'd light up at certain points. And we would watch Rudolph and Frosty on TV. And my husband would just sit and watch the kids. And I remember if you talked during the movie, Matthew wouldn't take his face off of the TV. He wouldn't quit looking at it. But to you, he would put his hand up, like, quiet. And they would sit and watch the movie all the way through. And they would even stare at the commercials so that they wouldn't miss the next part of the movie coming up. It was so sweet. Anyway, I ran into a thrift store the other day real quick because I was driving past it, and I thought I better run in there and see if they have any vintage Christmas ornaments, because this particular store, I have found some of the best ones for 25 cents to $1, and I've gotten some really old antique ones. And I walk in and find my biggest quirky item yet. I saw this, someone had just donated it. It was a wingback chair with beautiful fabric. But it wasn't fabric. It was vinyl. It was total vinyl. And I thought, I bet this thing's been Windexed 1,000,000 times because it was in perfect shape. And I thought, well, that's kind of clever, putting vinyl on something. I don't know. I was trying to take a picture where you guys could see the shininess of the vinyl, and I don't know if it really shows up here, but it was kind of wild. And then if that wasn't enough, I get up front by the checkout, and there are 2 chairs like this done with the same pattern. So somebody donated their whole ensemble. So I thought I'd share that with you guys and you'd get a kick out of it. So I want to thank you all for all the comments you made about my shop, the little tour of my shop. And I'll keep giving you more tours as I decorate it different and as it warms up this spring and I change it around. I'll take more pictures and I may even be able to video some of my open houses and stuff. But you guys made such nice comments about how warm and comfortable it was in there and how inviting, and it really is. And I'm enjoying my little shop a lot, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed it too. And one of my viewers told me that this pattern on scarves and sweaters is called Fair Isle. And I had heard that name before, but I couldn't understand exactly what they were saying. So I looked it up, and it's a knitting technique that originated in Scotland. And this man that was like a king of Wales, I believe, or I can't remember. You'll have to look it up. Fair Isle in Scotland. It's a little island of about 60 people. And one of their kings over there, or prince, he would wear a sweater and a jacket that had this fancy technique, a knitting technique, and it became known as the Fair Isle knitting technique. So I learned something and I was happy to. So my pantry's all clean and stocked and ready to bake pies, and I'm getting so excited about Thanksgiving. I hope you guys are. I was thinking last year I didn't do any recipes for Thanksgiving because I don't cook until the day before, and you guys need the recipes way before then, so we don't have much time before Thanksgiving. But I'm thinking if there was one recipe I would share with you guys that you might enjoy, would be my dressing recipe. And it's very simple and basic. It was my mother's, and it's not fancy like all the others I see online, but it's the best dressing in the world to our family and to some of our extended family. They always say, oh, I've got to have Marcy's dressing for Thanksgiving, and it is so good. That's what I look forward to the most. I know my son Matthew does. Everybody likes it. And I don't think Marcus likes it. He doesn't like stuff like that. But everybody else does. So if I get a chance this weekend, I may cook a little turkey breast and get the broth and make a little dressing this weekend and show it to you before Thanksgiving. So you might want to try it. I think you'll like it. Like I said, it's our favorite, and we can't imagine Thanksgiving without it. And it's simple, simple, simple. And I will show you how the stockings dry and how I end up decorating them and where I put them in my house. And I have a few more ideas. I got a lot of scrap wood left from my countertops, so I've got a couple more projects I've seen in the magazines and online that I'm going to make. Small projects that won't take very long. And last night I got up in the middle of the night. Well, it was about 5 in the morning. I got up early and got me a drink, and I was walking past my kitchen counter and the night lights were on, and I thought, I'm going to stop and take a picture of this for you guys to let you see how happy I am with my countertop. The stain has really set in and has been buffed out and sanded and buffed again, and I ended up putting some Butcher Block oil conditioner on it and let it soak in and then buffed it off. And I'm going to have to do that occasionally to keep it shiny. But guys, I'm so in love with my countertop. I can't even tell you how happy I am. This is in the middle of the night, and I have a couple of little soft lights going, and it glows kind of orange, but it doesn't look orange in real life. Although I do like a little undertone orange coming through. But this is what it looked like this morning when the light started coming through the windows. It starts being more brown and not so orange. But I'm getting choked up here because I'm thinking about all these children's books and Christmas stuff and Thanksgiving and countertops that make me happy. And some people might say, oh, who wants an old pine countertop when you can have a nice store-bought granite countertop? Well, me, because I'm easy to please. And I get a lot of joy out of things that some people might not. So I want you guys all to remember to encourage the little children to read and get a lot of good stories into them and read yourself. Like I said, I sat down and looked at all these books and read them, even though I'd read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas probably 100 times in my life. I read it and I enjoyed it. So I did bake a pie the other night. This isn't it, but I hope you guys are all looking forward to Thanksgiving and getting your recipes all together and looking forward to seeing your family. I know that we don't have a lot of family come over, but for dinner, but then later in the evening people stop by and we eat again, and that's always fun. So as always, I would like for you to go over to Instagram and join me on there, MarcyJoe631, and I've been getting a lot of questions, and probably after Thanksgiving I'll sit down and do a question and answer video, and you'll get to find out what you want to know about me. I didn't think I was that interesting, but some people want to know some things. And if you could like and subscribe, it would help my channel so much. And if you've already liked and subscribed, just share it with your friends and ask them to share it with their friends if this is the kind of content they like, and maybe my channel can grow and grow. And I want you all to know that I love you from the bottom of my heart.